Thank you, Eduardo, for the introduction. I'm from the UK and I am a patient. I'll start by going through my patient journey with you all. And it was actually when I was 22 that my health took a turn for the worse. And it was after the birth of my twin daughters. However, the problem had already been there for a number of years already. And I actually had my first abscess when I was only 14 years old. And it was when I got to the age of around 18 that they was actually increasing in number, in size, and in frequency. So that was when I decided to go and see my GP. And initially, he actually diagnosed me with herpes. So as you can imagine, this was a huge shock to me. And at the time, my partner James was going away to university. So this diagnosis actually caused immense pressure on our relationship. Luckily, we did trust each other, so we managed to get through that. However, my health still continued to go downhill. And so I took myself to go and see various doctors. I saw sexual health doctors, I saw emergency doctors, I saw nurse practitioners, and it was all without any hope whatsoever. I was just being labelled as dirty, unclean, unhygienic, overweight, which obviously had a real huge impact on me emotionally and mentally, and as well as obviously enduring the daily physical pain that I was going through. And it was actually after 10 years that my GP finally decided to put me through to a referral. But this was after several doctors on numerous occasions with no help whatsoever. And this was back in 2005. And on my very first dermatologist appointment, I was diagnosed with the illness hidradenitis suppurativa, known as HS. I was already told on my first appointment that it was already very severe, stage 3, too advanced for any surgery whatsoever. But I didn't think about that at the time. I was actually relieved. I had a name to what I was actually going through. And it sort of gave me relief that I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't overreacting about my health. However, these feelings soon changed when I went home. I tried to research and look into HS, but there was hardly anything that I could find, and what I did find was actually really scary. I quickly found out that HS was incurable, it was lifelong, there was little in the way of treatments to help, and there was no support. There was no advice, no guidance I could follow. And so now I was actually feeling trapped, that this was a prison sentence hanging over me and there was actually no way out. And obviously, over time, this affected my work life. I was having to take time off work due to ill health and the pain and not being able to move without even wincing. And this obviously made me slip into a deep and dark depression, which was in around 2006. I'd never let my girls see me cry, but it was always after they went to bed. I'd just sit and cuddle with my husband and just cry. And due to the effects of HS and coupled with depression, I was ended up being signed off sick from work for a continuous amount of time. And altogether, it was almost a year. And unfortunately, at the end of 2006, I lost my job. My career was over, and our entire family income was reliant upon James. However, my health still deteriorated, so I still needed hospital appointments, and they increased in frequency. My local hospital couldn't actually do anything else for me, and I was actually referred to London, which then meant that my husband had to take holiday entitlement to take me to my appointments. And this actually ended up becoming an issue for James's employer. They didn't understand how I was so poorly, why I needed so many appointments, and the times that my appointments were not convenient for his employer. So believe it or not, in 2009, my husband lost his job because of my ill health. And I couldn't believe it that it was actually my health that affected his career. And I was devastated, and this made me obviously feel more of a burden. And not only did HS affect my career and James's career, it obviously affected family life. I couldn't run with my girls. I couldn't take them to the park. I couldn't catch them because I couldn't run after them. They couldn't even sit on my lap, and I couldn't hug them because of the instant and intense pain that I was in. And so, to put it bluntly, I was literally housebound. James ended up becoming the mum and dad very quickly. He had to do everything from the cleaning to the cooking to the household chores. And even the most simple and mundane tasks that I should have been able to do, he was having to take over. This obviously led to guilt and frustrations at being a wife and a mother. And I couldn't even climb the stairs. So for 5 years, I didn't actually share a bed with my own husband. And if the girls cried at night, I couldn't get to them. So it was Daddy that went to calm them down. And obviously, this led to feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, and even more guilt. And I was actually ashamed of the person who I'd become. I was extremely low and depressed all of the time. But I was lucky that my GP actually recognised that symptom. And in 2007, he sent me to CBT counselling, which is cognitive behavioural therapy. And eventually, it actually helped me immensely. But to begin with, I was in a really dark place. I couldn't see any light any way that I turned. I had low body image, low self-esteem, no confidence whatsoever. I was in complete isolation, and it was just all entirely through the devastation of HS. Over time, as I said, the therapy did help me, and I began to actually accept that I did have HS. And it didn't have to mean that my life had ended, and it had just changed course. I began to get stronger emotionally and mentally. And it was around the same time in 2007 that I was actually referred to London. And looking back in hindsight, this was actually probably one of the best things that could have happened to me. I was actually placed under a dermatology team that had a keen interest in HS, the effects that HS actually has on the patient's life. And I was under a team that was thirsty for more information. And at my severe stage of the disease, they were very thorough with me. The team wanted to know absolutely everything, anything that I could tell them at all, and they were interested. And for the first time, I actually felt that I was a person again. I was being listened to by people that I knew wanted to help me. And I actually felt valued, which hadn't happened for a long time. And over time, I actually got back my self-worth. My confidence grew, and I actually began to have a new focus in life. And it was time to help other HS patients. I could not allow anybody else to go through what I had gone through for years. And as a patient of chronic illness, it's very easy to feel a burden to society, and it's easy to just get forgotten and lost in the system. The chronic pain and frustrations that we face on a daily basis is exhausting, and we just end up becoming numbers and statistics. Sometimes it takes every piece of strength that we have just to get out of bed, to wake up each day knowing it's going to be a challenge, and to know that we actually have to fight for a place in society makes life very daunting. And this is why the digital world is actually invaluable. The digital world doesn't judge people, and it includes everyone where we can actually be equals. I'm very lucky that I had a fantastic support network around me, and mainly that was down to James. He was actually amazing throughout the whole journey, and even to this day, he remains to be my rock. So over time, I began to research more into HS, and I couldn't understand why there was no information. There was no support for any HS patient out there. So I decided that HS had taken enough of my life, and I could not allow that to continue, and I wasn't going to allow that to happen to anybody else. So together, James and myself began to set up the HS charity, and we became the first registered charity for HS in the UK in 2009. Today, we're now known as the HS Trust. And throughout my personal journey with HS, the difficulty obtaining an accurate diagnosis, any adequate treatment plan, and just finding a caring healthcare professional, there was still one thing that was missing, and it was a real void in my life, and that was support from the medical community, but hope. All patients with chronic illness, where every aspect of their life is affected, they often suffer pain emotionally and physically, but they still have to have hope and support. They need something to be able to hang on to that will actually help them to progress and move forward, and they need something to make them realise that they're not alone. I was lucky that James actually knew and understood the technical world, and he knew about web design and development. So in 2007, he single-handedly built the charity's website. And that was the forefront of our organisation that was launched into the internet. And through this platform, we was able to push for further awareness of HS and to do fundraising, which together enabled us to gain the charitable status. Patient support is actually paramount when dealing with chronic illness. When I was diagnosed, which was back in 2005, I had nothing. There was no literature, there was no resources, there was no one that I could turn to for any advice or guidance. I actually only found one online Yahoo support group, and that literally had just a handful of members that was to represent the entire UK. We now, as a charity, produce the patient literature. And the charity uses the literature to act as a guide to HS patients. But it also helps to continue to promote the charity's mission. And we actually help to further the awareness surrounding HS, including education. And the HS Trust also has a medical advisory board. That ensures that all of our information remains factual, credible, and current. And the main focus and what we do is to strive that we actually continue to support HS patients. I feel personally that the website is actually the main heart of the charity. It's the main contact point, and it provides patients with literature advice, it provides all-round disease information, and it also helps with the continued awareness. But the website is also there for healthcare professionals. And it's a direct route to be able to contact a real person. Through the platform, we help to spread HS awareness and education on a global scale. We use the internet to be able to get any requests answered immediately and as soon as possible. And through the past years, our literature has helped HS patients globally. And we've actually used our internet to increase our reach to HS patients. And this has happened throughout the entire world. And it has continued to make all of our awareness campaigns extremely successful. The internet, along with the introduction of social media, is the quickest way that has actually enhanced our charity's growth. And in 2010, we averaged around 3,000 unique web hits per month. But now, which is just 5 years on, we have over 12,500 unique website hits every single month. And this increase has been made possible literally due to the instant available access that is there through the World Wide Web. When I was diagnosed, I felt completely isolated. No one was around to talk to. No one even understood what I was going through. No one understood what pain I was feeling and how much of a burden I actually thought I was. Now, with thanks to the ease of access that people have using social media like Twitter or the website, or even interactive sites like Facebook, patients have social connections again, and with people who are actually going through the same thing. They have someone to chat to and someone to reach out to. And using these interactions, they can actually guarantee that someone will be online day or night. The cyber network is invaluable to patients with chronic disease, and is actually used as a disease management coping mechanism. And it wouldn't even be overreacting to say that it is a lifeline to patients with chronic illness. Over the years, not only has the digital world been able to connect patients, but there's been a huge increase in computerised care, online check-in at the hospital, e-prescriptions, and even electronic patient records. Big data is really influencing the treatment pathway of a patient. But what does big data really mean to a patient? Most patients are unaware that big data even exists. The information stored about them, the countless test results, all the facts and all the figures, it literally means nothing. And the main reason it means nothing is because it's actually the patient's life. The patient lives the big data, so it's personal. Also, the main thing as well, to those that are actually asked about big data, they're actually more concerned with the privacy issues, the data protection, and who will be the person that will actually be able to access that information that's stored about them, and not the content. It is an unfortunate fact that millions of patient records are vulnerable, and it does pose a real concern. The most important factor to a patient is ensuring that we're treated as an individual, not a number and not a statistic. I know, as most people do, that progression into the digital age is vital towards an improved patient care plan. It's paramount to actually revolutionise the way that clinical research is conducted, but I feel that big data could be having a negative impact. As this field rapidly evolves, patients and patient advocates may not actually feel knowledgeable enough to take part in design or evaluation, and this in turn creates a shortfall in patient participation. The end result of any clinical research should be to benefit the patient, to improve the quality of life, and the end result has to remain practical and feasible. It's extremely important not to actually forget or lose sight of what the end goal actually is. And patients and patient advocates are essential in any clinical research. Patients with a chronic illness actually have a desire to be understood, to be included, and actually to be valued as an individual. Their main focus is to be able to lead that normal life. And it's for these reasons that they actually need to be included into clinical research. They need to be made aware of big data. They need to be made aware that it exists and what it actually means for them. Big data is everywhere, and through various analysis, conclusions can be made. Even differing conclusions can be made using the same data. But you still have to ask yourself this: is it actually within context? Information can be gathered through medical records, test results, Facebook, apps on smartphones, even through the World Wide Web. But where does critical thinking come into play? Big data is not representative of absolutely everything. And if misinterpreted, it could lead to disastrous effects, particularly when surrounding health issues and daily lives. Assessments and test results are indeed factual, and facts do have answers. But what if it's the wrong answer? What if the data used overvalues one area and then undervalues another area? What would or could the effects be of concluding an incorrect answer, which could have an incorrect treatment plan for the patient? How would a patient's life be affected? Big data and facts are great, but on their own, do they solely provide a purpose? Asking questions is complex, and using critical thinking is paramount in the decision-making process towards patient care and disease management plans. Big data, as we are all aware, is home to facts, but facts can still be vulnerable. Potentially, data can be interpreted to mean anything. Data is also processed nowadays at lightning speed. But this also then poses opportunities to make bad judgments very quickly as a result. As patients, we can have the responsibility and the human right to ensure that critical thinking continues, which is something that data is not capable of. Data can't comment on creativity or design, and it can't actually raise questions about any results that are gathered. In my opinion, we still have to have and keep the ethical approach to fact-finding. And big data on its own might not be a great thing, but it has the potential to change a patient's life and improve the quality of life that the patient has. Most of the time, appointments where patients see healthcare professionals can last between 5 to 10 minutes to half an hour. But that just isn't enough time. It's not enough time to gain any adequate or satisfactory answers. And just because the patient then leaves the doctor's office does not mean that the disease disappears or that the disease subsides. However, almost all of the time, when the next patient comes in, the life of the previous patient then becomes a distant memory. If a patient could actually have access to their own data and their own medical records, or just have somewhere to make notes and changes about their health, to have that inclusion that they actually need, not only could this provide more detailed data about the patient, but it will empower the patient. Data will be then able to be included between the dialogue between the patient and the doctor, and it will lead to better disease management, self-management, and even home care plans. This would enable the patient to become so much more self-aware, and more importantly, just have that sense of involvement. If you can ensure that patients and patient advocates are included in clinical research, as well as big data, you will achieve greater outcomes. Patients need to have a better chance of their needs being met, but they have to remain practical. But more importantly, they have to remain in context. Allow patients to keep their voice so that we still remain valued as humans and not just statistics and numbers. I must also add that I'm extremely honoured and glad to be here today and to be a part of events like these. But I'm also very excited to know that patients' views, opinions and feelings are still regarded. We have here today, alongside myself, other patients who are passionate about ensuring medical care can be monitored and even possibly improved. And I look forward to seeing you at the workshop this afternoon, where we can hopefully work together to improve the lives of daily patients so that they know that we still do matter and that we are valued as individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tara, and thank you for sharing your personal story and really giving that patient perspective that also Brian highlighted is so important. And also, like you mentioned, please do come to your workshop if you want to hear more and hear more patient stories. The Patient's Den, it's a workshop, track 1.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I have lots of questions that I would have loved to have asked, but they're telling me that we have to keep it running, keep the flow running. But thank you so much for sharing your story, and the best of luck with HS Trust.
Thank you. Thank you.
Donnie?